to episode number 2 of this very special edition of the Pre-Patch Podcast, where we talk about what it takes to actually start a podcast. I'm joined by Enigma, one of the other hosts from the Pre-Patch Podcast team. What's going on, Enigma?
Not much, man. We're really excited about tonight's actual discussions and everything like that. So looking forward to it. Hopefully everybody else is having a good day. And how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Well, in this episode, like I said, we're going to go and talk about setting up your equipment, talking about your recording space, your hosting, programs, editing, and all that kind of stuff. And on our last episode, we actually talked about finding your niche, right? And how you want to get started, defining your purpose for what your podcast is actually going to be about, finding people that you want to do that with, and then also just really jumping off and doing it, right? And actually getting your show kind of off the ground. But in this episode, we're going to talk about equipment. We're going to talk about a lot of in actually doing the episode and then nitty gritty with that. And the first thing that I think everybody kind of does is cool, I'm going to do my show. Let's go out and buy $700 worth of equipment, right?
Yeah.
Or they start Googling how they're going to go and do and host and actually do a show. And you're going to get a lot of different answers about budgets and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be expensive, right? I think that,
No.
We're using very different mics and visual equipment and cameras and all that kind of stuff. Cause I know, Enigma, we started off with nothing of what we have now, right?
Nothing. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even have a camera, and I was messing around with a little Blue Yeti that's still back there someplace in my on my countertop over there on my desktop over there. So
yeah. So, making sure that you understand what is your budget, what is it that you want to spend, on equipment wise and getting started. That's really going to be a really great starting, kind of point to kind of kick off, because you can do it with your phone. You can do it with a camera that's on your phone. Your phone has a mic on it. You can do it with just this, right? And record it just with this if you want. But if you do want to, start using cameras and all that, understand that the more that you add into it, the more that it's going to start to get a little bit more complicated, right? This mic specifically is an XLR mic. That means that it's hooked up with, a different type of cord than just like a USB plug-in mic, right? And so now I have to figure out, how do I get that to speak with my computer or with whatever it is that I'm recording my software, my show on, and the software and all that. So there's a lot of things that you can do where really ultimately you just need to be able to sit down, make sure that it sounds good, make sure that you can hear everybody. You don't have an air conditioning unit rattling in the background or something like that, or a fan going off in the background. And that's really all that you necessarily need. And then work your way each step up to getting something, a little bit better, right? Improving the audio a little bit more, improving the camera a little bit more, and all of those types of things. And that's what we did, right? I think that also goes really, really well into talking about your actual recording space, because we talked about making sure you don't hear a fan. And there's a lot of pitfalls that happen there, right? People kind of just think, okay, well, I could just throw a mic on to a table and I don't, and then I can go ahead and have a conversation, which you can, absolutely you can, right? But, if you do that in your living room and all of a sudden someone barges in your door, well, now that person's now on your show, whether they were an intended guest or not.
Unintended guests. That's
right.
That's the best kind of guest, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's understanding kind of the space that you're going to be in, and not just the actual recording space, but also the recording, time, and all of those types of things, right? Because whether you're going to do it at night and scheduling it for a night show that you're going to record, or whether you're doing it in the middle of the day, you have to think about all the things that are going to be going on around you, and making sure that it works not only for your schedule, but for everybody else's schedule, because those are big things, right? That's all going to affect what's going to happen in the show, and what people are going to hear. But, ultimately for me, I want to be in a place that I'm comfortable. So I'm surrounded by a bunch of stuff that I like, which is all gaming stuff. Enigma, you're in a very comfortable chair right now. It looks like.
I'm just in my office, in my room right now, just chilling in my chair. So
right. So because we're comfortable, that means that we're a lot more engaged and kind of, willing to kind of talk, and our hosting, which is actually our next topic, really is a lot easier, right? Because when you're hosting a show, there's different types of hosts. And if you're not comfortable with where you're at, or the equipment that you're using, or the sound and everything that you're kind of getting in the show and in the recording, going to make it a lot more difficult. I think to actually host a show and do those kind of things. And you know, you've got your own style. My style is very different than Enigma style, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
It definitely is. It's a 180 on him. Like he's usually very loud, very rambunctious. I'm a little bit more professional, a little bit more laid back, and everything like that. So
yeah, it's each person you're going to have on the show and each thing all kind of goes into balancing out your the kind of melting pot that you're going to have, you know, and each host that you have on there, you should be able to play and banter back and forth. You know, you want to be able to have kind of that good chemistry. And hosting is a skill. Like, please keep that in mind. It is not something that just is like, either you have it or you don't. Like, this is something that you build upon. I know for a fact that like myself and Enigma and the other people that we have on the pre-patch podcast, this is not something that we just naturally were like, okay, good at. Like, this is something that we all kind of sharpened and learned how to do and play off one another. That's
for sure,
super
yeah.
important.
It's
But
it's one of those things where being content creators prior to even doing the podcast really was a good thing, because that kind of sets you up for success moving into the actual podcasting. So
absolutely. And also I think a really big thing is that a lot of people kind of don't think about, or on in contrary, they actually overthink is like, if you're going to have guests on the show, right? What is that going to look like? And so
yeah,
there's also some prep work that goes into that, where, you want to kind of interview that person a little bit, get to know them, a little more before they have them on the show. You don't want to just kind of bring them on cold, because maybe
for sure.
they're not used to being and doing interviews. They could be extremely like, rusty or nervous, or have some kind of trepidation about doing a show, whether it be live or pre-recorded. So interacting with your guests a little bit more beforehand, making sure that like there's some questions that could be lined up for that
That's what I was about to
guest.
say. Make sure that they are fully aware of the question. Like that is one thing that, you know, you'll see a lot of, is like if a guest isn't sure what you're talking about, they can actually, it can completely ruin that entire interview. Like if you pop them with a question that they weren't prepared for necessarily.
Right.
Um,
And this is also really good when you're talking about whether you want to do it live or you want to do a pre-recorded, right? And there's a lot of different programs that allow you to do both. That allow you to do a pre-recorded show, or multicast out to different platforms, whether that be like YouTube or Twitch or Twitter, or whatever other, platform, TikTok, that you want to maybe do it live to, or again, if you want to record a show, and those things are like OBS, right? There's editing software out there that's like, Minvo. There are Audacity. There's a bunch of different types of programs. And the reason that I bring up, these programs specifically is because if you're having a guest on, or you're doing something, live versus doing something recorded, that's a big difference, right? And you kind of have to be able to juggle, hey, how do I handle a situation that may happen live or may happen kind of, recorded? Because you can, on a recording, you can edit, right? On something live, you can't edit. And I know that Enigma, we use OBS, right? You
we
want to
do,
maybe
yeah.
what does OBS stand for?
OBS is open broadcast software. If you're any kind of a live streamer or anything like that, you know what OBS is already. There's a few other options out there, but OBS is generally the one that's used for the
Yeah.
predominantly throughout most Twitch streaming and everything like that. So
Yep. And with OBS, it can seem very, very daunting. It's actually not. Like, you get in, and there is a section that lets you set up for scenes. And scenes are essentially what you saw when the show started, which was our logo and everything. And then another scene is this one that you're seeing right here, which is us sitting here talking. Those are scenes. You set up those scenes, and then you set up an ending scene. And guess what? Well, now you've got yourself, a
good to go.
video podcast. That's really all that is needed. Obviously, if you're doing an audio show, you don't have to have that. You just need to have intro and outro music, and now you're good, right? But that can still all be done inside of OBS, because you can record, you can stream, you can do all of that right inside of one program. And the nice thing about it is free. The program doesn't cost
Yeah.
anything. It's completely free.
You also got stuff like Audacity. If you're more
Yep,
of a an audio
yep,
format only, that's a good one, and it is also free. So you
yep.
can tons of free options out there that you don't have to go with paying money
Absolutely.
for necessarily a subscription or anything like that. So
Yep. And don't, that's another thing too, is don't get lost in the, or caught in the traps of like, oh, I have to pay for this. Oh, I've got to pay for that. I need this software, so I need to pay for that. Right. You're going to find a lot of softwares that are like, oh, I have to go out and I need to pay for this because it's going to clean up my audio, or I need to go pay for this, like audio, this pack and do this. Like you don't need all that. Like I said, OBS is free. Audacity is free. All of those things can record, go live, all of that, shoot your podcast with whatever that you need. And it doesn't cost you a single dime or dollar. So that is a area that I know when we were starting, we had to do quite a bit of research and found out.
for sure.
I do want to talk about editing. And this is where Enigma really gets to come in because, I've, as we talked about hosting, I do a lot of the hosting. I do a lot of like the talking and the segue. Enigma is very much our editor, and he uses some really awesome programs and stuff like that to edit our software. So Enigma, take it away, man. Editing.
Yeah.
How does that
Yeah,
work?
so as I said, there's several different options. One of the biggest things is like if you're an audio only or a video only, that's going to depend. Like that's definitely going to dictate which ones of these you're going to be using, right? Obviously, as we said earlier, if you're mostly an audio only podcast, you really just need Audacity, right? Like Audacity is going to be everything that you need. You can load different sound files, whatever you've got with your podcast. Your entire podcast can be loaded in there. Add in some tracks, do a little bit of splicing of the audio and everything like that, cut out some of the weird sections like the ifs, the uhs, the weird noises that are going on in the background, right? And then you're good to go. Like that's good to post. Generally though, if you're doing like a video podcast like we're doing right now, you're gonna need something a little bit more in depth. So you're gonna need something like I personally use DaVinci Resolve. I know there's Adobe makes some other options. There's probably tons of other options out there that you could find that are free and open source and able to be used. But as I said before, I use DaVinci's Resolve, which is just a free to use editor, a video editor that's really good. Actually, it does a really good job with it, and it's very in depth when it comes down to everything. Very close to Adobe's products when it comes down to like functionality and form, right?
Right.
One of the other options that we use, and one of the biggest ones that we've used recently to kind of help kind of skyrocket our social media profiles has been Minvo.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know what Minvo is a AI editing program that takes long form content like our podcast, which is a 2-hour podcast, takes that 2-hour podcast, the AI goes through, analyzes it, pulls out a bunch of different content. It's for short form content like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, Reels, Facebook, anything like that. Takes that out, does most of the editing for you, has some really cool options on it that you can then take and post and benefit from. So that is two of the bigger options that, or two of the bigger programs that we use in general to kind of edit the podcast as well as push it out to the people that are listening to us, if that makes any sense.
I
So
can say that as someone that the AI program likes to pick up quite a bit, I'm actually very happy with the faces that it gets
it
and
does
like
really good.
grabs. It doesn't, I don't look, I'm not making a really goofy face whenever it wants to clip it or grab it. So I really appreciate that. And then, obviously talking to about kind of where you're going to host, your podcast, right? Choosing whether you want it to be on Apple podcast, whether you want it to be on Spotify, YouTube, selecting the right platform there. And honestly, there's not a wrong platform, right? Like you really want to try to get your podcast out to as many
To as
people
many of them as possible. Yeah.
right? And so there are applications out there too that allow you to do that, like Libsyn and Anchor and all of these that are, make it a lot easier to just kind of take your show and then just throw it out to the masses. Right. So
One-stop shop, upload it, it's out to everything pretty
right.
much.
And,
So
and that's awesome. And then, when you're in there, right, your show is now out to the masses, right? Or you've done your show. It's now, how do I want to engage, with my community, and how do I promote my show, and how do I actually kind of get it to the next, step and grow it and continue to get it to that next level. And we're going to talk about that one on the next episode. So episode 3, we will be covering all post show and what do you do there. So that concludes kind of episode 2. And in this one, we've gone over the equipment that you need, the room space that you're going to be in, hosting and getting all over all the hurdles and how it is to be a host and what you need to do to be a good host. We talked about different podcasting programs like OBS and Audacity, and then we also talked about editing, right? And Enigma gave us a crash course on how to edit the show and what it takes, like using programs like Minvo and a few others. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure that you come and check out episode number 3. Like I said, where we're going to go, what do you do post show? See you guys on the next one. Bye.